Well, good morning. If you're watching this live or on demand, perhaps good afternoon and even good evening, because we have viewers from around the world that are tuning in to this session that is the Cyber Resiliency Hour with myself, Ali Hirji. Some of you may know me as the lead for Cybersecurity Innovation Center at Durham College, as well as the AI Hub. And my job today for the next 45 odd minutes is to introduce you to individuals who play a key role in the cybersecurity posture of our beautiful province of Ontario. One of the things that I often say is that if everyone is thinking alike, someone's not thinking. And the people that I have today are folks who think outside of the box. Often I've been heard as saying that cybersecurity is not set in stone, it's set in jello. And today we're going to be looking at this shifting landscape and how some of these individuals have taken time out of their busy schedules to be a part of what's going on at the province and supporting not just businesses, small to large to medium, but also our wider population as a whole, going from a variety of ages. Cybersecurity knows no boundaries, and my folks today certainly have explored each and every angle of how cybersecurity impacts our day-to-day lives. So without further ado, I'm going to ask each of my guests today to introduce themselves, tell us a little bit about what they do, and more importantly, also tell us about the subcommittees that they're a part of with the province of Ontario. Carolyn, welcome to the show, and I'm going to ask you to introduce yourselves and get us started.
Great. Thanks so much, Ali. It's great being here to talk about cybersecurity. So I am the General Manager of Information Technology Services at the Thames Valley District School Board. And for your listeners, I'm not sure if everybody knows where Thames Valley is, but we're actually situated in the London area and we cover 3 counties. So we've got a fairly large school board, and I am a member of the cybersecurity broader public sector expert panel. And on that committee, I'm working with a great group of professionals, and I also am responsible for chairing the education and training subcommittee for that panel. So it's a pleasure to be here. Thanks so much.
Pleasure's all mine, and I definitely want to dive into when you spoke about the education committee as well. Education is a process, never complete, and interested in learning more about the process and the key areas that you're looking to explore. I know that in the lead up to this session, some folks have even talked to you about environments for teaching cybersecurity, talking about new gamification-like environments. So it'll be interesting to explore that as we go through the conversation. Taking flight from beautiful Thames Valley, I'm going to go to John Roberts and ask him to introduce himself and tell us a little bit about what he does and the subcommittees. John?
Hi, Ali. So my name's John Roberts. I'm the province's acting Chief Information Security Officer, as well as the Chief Privacy Officer and Archivist for the province. So a number of different roles in provincial government around information and data governance, information and data protection. And as CISO, I run the cybersecurity division for the Ontario Public Service, which is providing the support, encouragement, and connections for Carolyn, for Robert, Adam, and others on the Minister's expert panel. So our Minister, Minister Romano, set up a panel because he was well aware that while I've got an incredibly expert team who are really good at their jobs, that we don't have all the knowledge, all the answers, and certainly don't have the on-the-ground experience of what cybersecurity practice really is like in the broader public sector, the reality of operating in a school board or a children's aid society or a small municipality. So my division, as well as protecting the public service, supporting the expert panel, and the panel is helping us shape our offering and services to agencies of all shapes and sizes, and helping us strategize where we can make the greatest impact in achieving cyber resiliency. So looking forward to the conversation over the next 45 minutes and showcasing a bit of that work.
Fantastic. I couldn't have said it better. There's no one-size-fits-all solution in cybersecurity, and building community around services is absolutely essential to tailoring services. So thank you, John. I'm looking forward to diving deeper into the discussions as we move along. Next, we shall go and visit Adam. Adam, good to have you back on. Tell us a little bit about what you do, your role day to day, as well as your work with the province.
Thanks, Ali. So my role day to day is the Chief Information Security Officer for the Royal Bank of Canada. And I wear 2 hats in that role. I run the cyber operations team for RBC. which is all of your threat prevention, traditional sort of security capabilities used to protect an enterprise. And then the other hat that I wear on the Chief Information Security Officer role is really working with the different regulatory bodies in the regions that we operate the bank in, providing thought leadership around the strategy and how does the strategy need to change to continue to protect RBC or an institution as we go through this massive technical evolution that the enterprises are going through and accelerating through, with the result of COVID hitting. Every organization is going through digitization. The bank is no different. So providing that leadership and that direction to the organization of how we're going to protect, a large technical institution like RBC going forward.
Fantastic.
The subcommittee that I've been working with is really focused on kind of shared services models for, joint security operations centers, incident response, sharing of information across different areas of the broader public sector from a threat point of view, and making sure that we've got the prevention and preparation materials in place that can be leveraged by the broader public sector.
Fantastic. And I think that keyword disruption there, right? And the bank is not immune from that, given what happened with COVID. Satya Nadella put it really well. In 2 months, we've seen 2 years worth of innovation happen, and we've had to be on top of that. So, Adam, always a pleasure, and thank you for taking the time, as always, to all of you. Last but not the least, someone who's become a good friend and someone who's begun to follow quite actively as well. Robert, welcome to the show. Tell us a little bit about what you do and your role in the province subcommittees.
Well, thanks, Ali. And good morning, everybody. I'm Robert Wong. I'm the retired executive from Toronto Hydro. In my last role, I was the VP and Chief Information Officer, but also responsible for cybersecurity there as well. Currently, I'm the chair of the broader public sector cybersecurity expert panel, leading a team of 10 experts from the BPS, including my vice chair, Adam there, and working very closely with John Roberts and his team of cyber professionals who are been a fabulous resource in supporting the work of the expert panel throughout this process so far. I also chair the subcommittee for governance and operating model, trying to design and make recommendations to for governance processes and practices to really enhance the ability of broader public sector entities to provide strong oversight over the management of the cybersecurity risk at each of the entities within the broader public sector. So I look forward to the conversation today. Thank you.
Fantastic. And to our audience, I'm looking forward to diving into a couple of questions, and a lot of them that have come up just on the introductions alone. I like to use all the brains that I have, but also all the brains that I can borrow. And the ones that I have today certainly will provide us some very interesting perspective. So, Carolyn, I'd like to start off with you and your work in the school board sector, but also in the education subcommittee. Can you comment a little bit about how you've been working towards, or at least having discussions around creating cybersecurity resources, sure, for teachers and practitioners in the space, but is there stuff that's going around to support parents, to support children as well, especially given the hyper digital environment we find ourselves in? Carolyn?
Yeah, thanks for that, Ali. And you're absolutely right. There's a number of different stakeholder groups and facets associated with education and training to really uplift, everyone in cyber resiliency. From a K-12 or school board perspective, we certainly have been making quite a few inroads in the classroom and really helping to support students and their families and guardians with a lot more awareness and knowledge of cyber protection, safety, and privacy. But there's still more work to be done. And as you can imagine, this is such a complex area, and really the playing field keeps changing as threat actors keep changing and really challenging all of us to keep everything secure and private. So, one thing that we're looking at in our subcommittee is what opportunities do we have to really incorporate further into the K-12 curriculum, opportunities for students to really become aware and almost incorporate into the learning day cybersecurity protection and privacy. And similarly, as I mentioned, particularly in the K-12 sector, we've got a lot of minors, very young children, and this is really where the role of families and guardians.
Very interesting points brought up by Carolyn there, although I do think Carolyn, we may have lost you for a second just about 5 seconds ago. But
dear.
But I think we got all of your points in, especially the notes about curriculum. So I've taken some notes. So thank you for that, Carolyn. It wouldn't be an online session without a couple of hiccups here and there, but thank you for that very interesting opening. And I really like that reference to curriculum and making cybersecurity part of ongoing training. And we'll come to that very shortly. Adam, if I can come to you, because Carolyn brought up a really interesting point about the threat landscape that's changing. And you mentioned something in your introduction, Adam, about banks are not immune to what has been happening in the landscape and have been facing this evolving threat landscape. With your work in these subcommittees, can you comment a little bit about how this has built a community of sharing? I mean, you find different banks now, for example, working together and sharing intelligence. Has your work with the province, so on and so forth, allowed you to build more communities of practice, allowed you to create more sharing environments where people are sharing best practices, maybe even threat intelligence? Can you comment a little bit about that, Adam?
Yeah, so I think to Carolyn's point, I think there's still work to do in the information sharing capabilities that we have. And when you look at the broader public sector, obviously we've got a lot of constituents in that sector, and there's a lot of areas within that sector. There are still some silos that need to be sorted out so we can share more freely across the different constituents, because the threat actors have no problems sharing information. They have no problems sharing attack infrastructures. They are highly collaborative and highly specialized. And I think if we're going to be successful, with this initiative, we have to break down some of those barriers of information sharing. We have to be able to provide learnings and context to one another, understanding if somebody suffers a cyber crisis event or an attack, what did we learn from it? How can we make other people or other organizations aware of what's going on? So creating these shared practices and capabilities is going to be one of the areas of focus for the subcommittee. Are there shared services that need to be established that we can leverage to share information, that we can use to share context across the broader public sector constituents, and kind of, get everybody rising with the tide at the same time. So we need to build maturity across people, process, and technology in all of these organizations. You can't have, groups outpacing one another, because their maturation will stop. And it's important that we get this right and that we're able to address all of the parts of the broader public sector, regardless of size and maturity of the existing organizations. So that will be a key part of the subcommittee that I'm on, is figuring out how do we create a structure of shared services, start dropping the barriers and the silos that maybe exist within the broader public sector, and get people talking. It's not perfect, but certainly it's one of the outputs that we need to get through. And this is not just a VPS problem. This is a broader problem across our country in sharing information between sectors, because of how we're regulated and the kinds of privacy legislation that we've got in this country. It's not always easy to share information. So we have a big task ahead of us, but if we can figure out how to get over those hurdles, it will certainly make a difference in how we can protect the broader public sector.
I really like that definition, and I really appreciate the fact that you're appreciating competition, but I think you're emphasizing collaboration in the cybersecurity space, and these are extremely important qualities that we need. And again, the people, process, technology piece, and in that order. Thank you for emphasizing that, Adam. I'm going to go to John, and then we'll go to Robert, because I want to work a little bit with both what Carolyn and Adam said. And John, I want to go back to when you introduced yourself. You mentioned how dynamic the cybersecurity space is, no one-size-fits-all solution. There are multiple industries that the province needs to be looking at. You also have a very acute focus on data. How do you go about, from a provincial standpoint, bringing all of these stakeholders to the table, from the energy sector, the finance sector, the retail sector, so on and so forth? That's a lot of subject matter expertise that you need to bring to the table. How did you get started building these committees? How did you get started with community engagement?
So a great question. Yeah, the diversity of the community is both a strength and a challenge. And we We have, I think, an opportunity in that people are increasingly aware that cybersecurity matters. It's not just a technical hygiene factor. I mean, it is increasingly in the consciousness of society at large and of senior decision makers of all stripes, in government, in agencies, in the commercial sector. So cybersecurity is something that can't just be left to a few technical experts working in the IT shop to fix. The challenge that we have, though, is twofold. It's firstly, when that light bulb goes on, people don't know what they should be doing about it. And secondly, when the light bulb goes on, it is often very much in the context of a particular industry, of a particular vertical or a particular sector. So in the health sector, for example, cybersecurity has some particular dynamics. In the higher education sector, in the financial sector, and it is a challenge for people to get that maturity where they see the commonalities right across. But that's exactly, I think, where things like Carolyn's work on education, training people so that they have some common understandings, and it's not just knowledge that sits in technology areas, that there's education for end users, education for executives on governance boards. And then with the governance word, we're into Robert's world. How do we build the decision-making models that don't just manage cybersecurity within its technical context, but embed it in the governance of organizations as part of the risk structure. And doing that in a consistent way, so building those shared services that actually facilitate the connections across different industries, understanding what needs to be solved in a particular technical context and what needs to be solved more broadly. How do you share intel that will make sense with the diversity of organizations? So these different threads that we've got here on the call all kind of weave together, I think, to start to tackle your question of the diversity in the community, but the common interests that those diverse groups bring. And finally, I just say, we're not going to solve it by some kind of super organized, engineered top-down approach. It needs to be a bit organic, and it needs to be come out of the developments and the conversations and testing things in practice, people seeing what works, building, engaging with each other. So as you suggested, perhaps of the people, process, technology, people it could be the most important. I tend to agree. For getting that common journey, it is getting people talking together about their own insights, their own experiences. But at the end of the day, I'll just go back to my opening comment. We do have a fantastic opportunity in that cybersecurity is no longer just being treated as a compliance or a hygiene factor. People get the fact that it really matters, even if they don't quite yet know how they can help address it.
Absolutely. And you know what, I think, as sometimes those of us who get too involved in the technical side of things or the deployment side, we forget the importance of the community engagement side. And some of the community engagement specialists that also set up the province and engage the community, bring them together, demonstrating value all the time. That in and of itself is such an important skill when you're looking to bring people together, showing and demonstrating value. So John, thank you for that. And I will come back to unpacking that just a little bit as we move forward. Robert, I want to bring you into the conversation, but I will tell our audience, do excuse me, I think my cat might make a guest appearance very shortly. I have no idea where this term scaredy cat comes from, because my cat tends to believe she runs the universe. So if she does make an appearance, say hi, and she will not interrupt us in any other way. Robert, let's come to you, my friend. And Robert, I'm going to extend from what John just said, and this is to do with this element of shared services. We live in an ecosystem where we talk about shared CISOs, for example, and shared resources. When John mentioned the diversity, and when you think about shared services, how much of a challenge is it to put together the needs of such a diverse community and go out to look for partners, to look for vendors, to look for services? What are some of the challenges when putting together a shared services framework?
Yeah, no, that's a great question, and that is one of the challenges that we're facing as a panel, and Adam's on the shared services subcommittee, so I'm sure he's knee deep in this issue and this problem. given the diversity and the size of the broader public sector, with constituents from hospitals and healthcare and higher ed and school boards, K-12, and municipalities and children's aid, et cetera, and a bunch of even standalone agencies, to try to develop and design a shared services model that can accommodate the unique requirements of every sector is a huge, daunting challenge. And we don't have the silver bullet, and frankly, I don't expect that we will get to the final state in one shot. It'll probably be an evolution, a bit of a journey, to try to accomplish as much as we can in terms of meeting those diverse needs in the initial design, and through over time and through maturity, to scale up and expand and consolidate and be able to capture more and more constituents of the broader public sector. Not every sector are similar. Some are purely IT. Others may have operational technology, industrial control systems, Internet of Things devices. Privacy may matter more. In one sector, Carolyn talked about it. There are a lot of minors in K-12. So that requires a different approach. Some may handle credit cards. It's definitely a challenge, but we are looking to try to find as many commonalities as possible amongst the various sectors and the unique requirements. And where there are these kind of overlap areas, we will try to design the shared service model to accommodate as many of the members and across the sectors as possible.
Fantastic. And Robert, thank you for that. You've made mention of quite a few things, and I'm going to pull out one, and I'm going to ask Adam to come into this conversation, and then we'll go back to Carolyn. Adam, this question probably is a little left field, but I'm going to ask it nonetheless, and feel free to sort of tell me not to continue with this question, but I think it's an interesting one, Adam. And this has to do with the innovation ecosystem in Ontario. We've got folks like Rogers Cybersecurity Catalyst, for example, that have young companies that are also proposing solutions, and they're helping grow new innovations within Canada itself. When you think about shared services and some gaps that you might see even in services, has it facilitated any conversations for new innovations, for startups in Ontario? Anything from that perspective, whether from the province or with your work at RBC?
Yeah, I think for sure. So if we break the problem down into those three components, where it's people, process, and tech, the startup community helps us with a variety of things. There's technology solutions that are emerging for new problems that are emerging in the businesses. So if you think about the last 18 months, we went from on-prem workforces to remote workforces. So all of a sudden we have new business challenges that we didn't have a year and a half ago. So that startup community is helping us address some of the technical components of this new style of working and these technological transformations that organizations are going through. But I also think it gives us an opportunity, and this is where I think setting the culture across the broader public sector from a cybersecurity standpoint is incredibly important. And this is from the top down and the bottom up. Everybody, to John's point, needs to understand that cybersecurity is not a technology problem, it is a business problem. And it's the single biggest threat to businesses that they have to face today. So there's this education, communication, and preparation kind of approach that I think they need to understand. And culturally, that's kind of how we need people to start to think about it. And the startup community can help us, again, solve some of those problems. In the education side, how do you develop skills? And these aren't just technical skills. These are people that understand the problems of operating a business in a digital business landscape and the threat surface that they are trying to protect against. That's just not a cybersecurity or a technology problem. Yeah. This is understanding business services and how to build resilient business services. So I think what we're certainly seeing in the startup community is the startup community. There's for people that have been in this world for a long time, there is no shortage of cybersecurity technology companies. But I think what is interesting about the startup community is they are thinking differently, and they're disrupting and looking at some of the business problems that are emerging today and coming to the table with a new way of solving those business problems. The challenge, for a shared services organization is how do you integrate those components to build resiliency into the broader public sector? And that's the nuance that I think, people need to understand. Given the complexity that Robert went through, it's a difficult problem to solve. So I go back to, we need to make sure that we've got the right people and we're educating and we're building out skill sets that are applicable to the business problems that we face. And then bringing in technologies that can help us scale and provide things like automated threat response and analytics and insight so we can make smarter risk decisions as a broader public sector about how we want to manage risks or how we want to mitigate them and protect, the resiliency of our public sector services.
Absolutely. A mentor of mine once said that you never eliminate risk, you'll only lower the threshold for it. And I think the mention that you made about it being a business question around cybersecurity draws me into my next question. And Carolyn, I'll bring you back into the discussion, especially around the education side of things. So one of the things that I've realized, over the last year or so in teaching a lot of cybersecurity courses is, and perhaps this is just, my lack of experience that's coming out to the fore here. But Carolyn, I've noticed now that quite suddenly, at least in my career, teaching in a variety of institutions, I'm now seeing folks coming into cybersecurity courses that may not necessarily have a background, for example, in programming or hardware engineering or whatever have you. I have folks coming in from philosophy, from psychology, so on and so forth. I myself have made shifts into those sectors of study as well, just because of interest now. Can you comment a little bit about how the interest is widening in cybersecurity and how different fields, maybe even in the school board sector, and different areas of expertise are starting to want to learn more about cybersecurity? Carolyn?
Yeah, sure. And hopefully my internet will stay a little bit more stable this round. But I think, first off, that's fantastic to hear that you are experiencing, individuals from different disciplines coming into the cybersecurity field. That's one of the areas that my subcommittee is looking at is how do we enhance the number of really trained and experienced cybersecurity professionals, because this is a burgeoning field and we do have a shortage. One of the areas that we're looking into, particularly from a higher ed perspective, is how do we embrace and encourage more of these programs and create this consistent or some type of baseline approach on the learnings of these programs so that we get these well-rounded individuals that are coming through, graduates with that range of skills that Adam had mentioned. It's not just those technical skills that really helps to empower cybersecurity professionals. There are quite a few softer skills, investigation, strategy, negotiation, conflict resolution. I mean, it covers quite a large range. And to be fair, I think anyone has an opportunity to get into this field if they've got an interest in it. You don't have to have a technical background. There certainly are some technical learnings, and there's a lot of great vulnerability, risk management, advanced threat protection tools. But certainly for someone like me, I've got an urban planning educational background, and I've been in IT for over 20 years. So I think there's lots of great opportunities. But I think from a K-12 perspective, and one thing I had mentioned already was trying to incorporate this education and training with our younger students, is that really will help to, I think, and hopefully uplift more students and more interest in cybersecurity as they get into, post-secondary education. And I think there's a real neat opportunity, but the obligation, in my opinion, is also resting on vendors. We have, particularly in education, we rely on a lot of third-party software to support online learning, education, advancing students. And there really is an opportunity here for, a lot of the software vendors to uplift their services and make sure that what they're offering is secured, is private, is protecting folks' information. I mean, it's just such a huge area of opportunity. And I think where we can make inroads into some of these sectors, I think it will really help the greater good. And I love the conversation around diversity. We have to be incredibly inclusive regarding cybersecurity education and training, and really help to, as I've mentioned already, uplift everyone. We've got folks coming in, newcomers, we've got varying age groups, culture, backgrounds, and we really need to do everything we can to help create that linkage of what it means to, improve your resiliency around cybersecurity, because it's going to look different, for, as I've already mentioned, for, a 5-year-old, versus an 80-year-old. And again, where we have individuals that are coming in and maybe English isn't their first language, how do we help to uplift them? So I think there's lots of opportunities.
When you spoke, I was reminded of, as I mentioned, that I work at the AI Hub at Durham College, and the chair of our board is the CEO of Minute School. And in a recent keynote, he made such an important point, Tushar Singh from Waterloo. And he said, while addressing the talent gap in security and in AI in general, he said, look, we've got a lot of programmers, we've got pen testers, but we don't have pen testers who necessarily can communicate well or who can project management well. And I really like that emphasis on what you call the soft skills, because those are important for knowledge translation, for building community. So thank you for bringing that up. And towards the end, in our last round of questioning, I'll also come to the role of gamification. So stay tuned for that, Carolyn, but thank you for that very thorough response. John, I'll come to you and then we'll go to Robert. John, as part of your portfolio, you also mentioned that you have a acute focus on privacy as well. As part of your work with these committees and the engagement that you're doing, has it allowed for new opportunities to engage the community on privacy issues, especially issues that may have now emerged because of the quote unquote new normal that we find ourselves in? John, any perspective on that?
So the longer I work in cybersecurity, the more connection I see with the privacy world. And to my mind, they are really they're essentially two different lenses on information and data protection, on building trust and confidence, on that sort of resilient business model that Adam was referring to. So huge opportunities for getting, again, a hybrid, a best of both disciplines type approach, because there's been some very complementary but historically separated practices and thinking between the world of privacy and the world of cybersecurity. So privacy has, I think, been really good at thinking about process and context and authority and a lot of the policy settings. Cybersecurity has been really good at thinking about a lot of the technical and the network and connectivity risks and opportunities. Marrying those together really enhances the maturity of cybersecurity thinking around its kind of risk and contextualized understanding of information value, information risk, and it enhances the operationalization of privacy thinking. So really significant opportunities for those two to come together. And to your great discussion there with Carolyn about some of the awareness and education pieces. In the mind of the general public, often privacy and cybersecurity do blur into a kind of, how are you looking after my information, which is both cyber and privacy. So as we start to really strengthen these diverse communities of practice, engage with public awareness and sort of individual consciousness, the boundaries between historic privacy and cybersecurity practice do start to melt away. And similarly, at the top governance table, when we think of this as a big organizational risk, one of the key areas is compromise of personal information and all the reputational harm that comes with that. When we think about the significance of trust and the way in which threat actors are not just targeting business disruption, but targeting trust relationships and the ability to undermine those as an increasingly powerful threat and something that can be monetized. Again, we're into that world where privacy and cybersecurity don't look like two separate domains at all. So I think you're absolutely right to pick on that connection as something that is important. And to anyone listening who's in an organization where the privacy and cybersecurity worlds are separate and are not talking, one takeaway would be to, if you walk on one side of that fence, make sure that you're buddying up with your partner on the other. There are all too many organizations where privacy is still seen as a legal function sitting in a general counsel's office, and cybersecurity is seen as an IT function sitting in a CIO or a CTO's office, and those connections are not being recognized. So, I think it's a really fertile area for us to be addressing that broadening of the community, that diversification of views, and strengthening our collective toolbox for ways that we can absolutely support information protection and maintain that trust and confidence of our customers, the public, and our stakeholders.
Absolutely. I often say this in my classrooms when I teach in AI, that if AI is the rocket, data is the fuel, and understanding the security and privacy elements that go with data. You may have your data secured, but from a privacy perspective, there are other questions that emerge. And I think one of the things, John, that I've seen over a period of time is sometimes when we bring up privacy questions, it comes from a stance of negativity. And what I've tried to do now with our clients, for example, is put a positive spin to the discussion and bring it from a perspective of let's learn together. So I think how we approach the question of privacy also remains an interesting one.
Yeah, I completely agree with you in terms of that privacy piece. I can just butt in again. One of the things I try to tell senior executives is, if don't think of yourself as doing privacy just to comply with privacy statutes. If we didn't have any privacy laws, then I still believe all public entities and pretty much all businesses would still be trying to assure the privacy protection of information, because it is just so vital to meeting public expectations, to good governance, to maintaining any kind of credible business. That matters so much to the public at large that this can't be treated as a compliance exercise. And then you're immediately talking about privacy as an enabler of that digital transformation that folk have been discussing on the call today. So positive privacy as something that is delivering real value rather than privacy as risk, as threat, as compliance. Yeah, completely agree. I'm glad to hear you're teaching it that way.
Positive privacy, that is a term, or at least the title for my next lecture in class. Thank you, as always, John, for doing half my work for me. We've got about 6 minutes left, and Robert, I want to come to you, and then we'll go to some closing remarks. And Robert, this question comes from a couple of other conferences that I've been at, especially, when we talk about shared services and, shared resources and so on and so forth. How, especially with such a diverse community, Robert, do you help establish priorities? Robert?
Well, that's a complicated question. I think it all starts with, a bit of a self-assessment of where you are. What's your baseline security posture? The approach we've taken on this expert panel is, let's try to get the biggest bang for the buck. Go after the easy, low-hanging fruits. It's not complicated. It's not expensive. And to that goal, in our first interim report to the minister, one of the main recommendations was education. Awareness. That's relatively simple and inexpensive. But you know what? It addresses the issue of good governance, risk management, because like I mentioned, I think governance plays a key role in the success of the management of cybersecurity and the risk. So if you're a key decision maker, you're a board of director, you're an executive, CEO, whatever, there are many accountabilities that come with that role in the position. And if you're not aware of, the top risks that your organization is facing, and, I can assure you that cybersecurity should be one of the top risks that any organization should be facing, then you're really not doing your job. And at the same time, you're accountable. If something bad happens, ignorance is not an excuse that you can use, right? Because so that's where we're trying to help with our approach is, let's try to help with making recommendations for doing, getting the best out of the value of the money that you're going to spend, So, the training and awareness for executives, for the staff, internal phishing campaigns, awareness training, that could be online. It doesn't have to be, in-person classroom led. These are all quite inexpensive and I think very valuable approaches and tools to enhance cybersecurity posture in a short period of time. Adam keeps talking about people, process, and technology. Well, as we all know, people is probably the weakest link in this whole, journey to manage cybersecurity risk. And so, having an informed, management staff that understand the risk that the cybersecurity brings to the organization, and understanding the implications, the impacts of a hack. Broader public sector organizations provide an essential, very valuable service to Ontarians in the province. We all rely on it. Whether it's education, whether it's the hospitals or the municipal services, children's aid, you name it, right? I mean, they are there to provide a very, very valuable service. And when an organization gets hacked, business continuity gets disrupted, and you can't provide those very valuable services that all the public relies on. And so, if that's not enough of a risk to really, focus on and pay attention and prioritize and devote resources and effort to manage that risk to a tolerable level, then I think we're kind of asleep at the wheel then. So I think that's our approach. I mean, we can get into other details of kind of basic cybersecurity practices and tools and processes and so forth. But we're adopting, or we are endorsing the NIST cybersecurity framework. There's a recommendation from the expert panel to provide a common standard for BPS organizations in the way they operate and run their cybersecurity practices. And so, there's a maturity model that comes with it that we will be recommending. And so there are, kind of logical steps in terms of what are the basic things that you need to put into place. Multi-factor authentication, it's going to depend on the maturity of each of the individual organizations. But, I think following this approach of, following a standard cybersecurity standard and framework, going through a maturity model, biggest bang for the buck, low-hanging fruits, that's the way we're approaching it.
Absolutely. And I really like when you mentioned maturity, but also I really like the angle that, you're very true to the fact that, you got to keep in mind your budgets, and you kind of need to know what you can afford to do and how to time and space that out, because there are, at least we like to think there are, but there are no unlimited budgets, and knowing how to work within that. Adam, I think you had something to add to what Robert had just said.
I was going to pile on with Robert. I think, everybody recognizes that this is a journey, and it's not something you solve in 6 months. It's not something you solve in 2 years. Mm-hmm. And part of the solution needs to be cultural. So you have to set a culture of security awareness and preparedness inside of any institution, because that starts to prioritize it at the board levels and at the executive levels. And then the participants, your employees, whomever they are, recognize that they have a role to play in protecting your institutions, your organizations.
Agreed.
I think that the first part of this is, we need to take a step. We need to get the journey started. And then I think the second part to it is aligning to some common business outcomes. What are some things that we think are achievable? And this goes, I think, to Robert, your point around what's the biggest bang for our buck. There's some common business outcomes that we need to get to early days. And that is, we need to organize the conversation around a common set of security practices and principles and outcomes. And we need to set a culture across the BPS that security needs to be considered as part of any business service, business process, and the staff and the people are key to delivering on those capabilities. If we don't get that right, you can put as much technology in as you want. If somebody clicks on a link or downloads an attachment, it's game over. So the human factor becomes a very important part of being successful in this journey that we're taking.
Absolutely. I think, the journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step, and take a step in the right direction. So thank you, Adam and Robert, for that. We're very close to our conclusion. So I'm going to come to concluding remarks by asking each of our panelists one question and giving them about a minute to respond to it, if that is at all possible. Carolyn, let's begin with you. And this is on gamification. Could you comment very quickly on some trends that you're seeing there on micro-credentials and badging, and where you see things headed?
Yeah, I think the gamification around cybersecurity has helped to create more awareness and education among those that are participating in that. I always do feel that there's a fine line with gamification, where it's a positive educational experience versus too many people getting maybe into the lens of threat actors and the negative side of really pursuing some of those games where they're actually almost creating more exposure, right, to all of the bad things that can come about with, as I said, malware and any other, cyber incidents. So I think with anything, there's pros and cons. I would just caution parents and guardians, please know what your children are doing. And if they are gaming and looking at some of these great programs that are out there, just be mindful of what they're taking away, and just provide whatever oversight you can on that.
Absolutely appreciate that. The esports community is growing, and there's quite a few. I've seen digitized tabletop games that have come up as well. But as always, be vigilant. Who's running these games? What kind of communities are in place? Carolyn, very, very wise words, and thank you for that. Adam, very quickly to you. We're seeing the evolution of titles from CISO to BISO to so on and so forth. Where do you see things headed from a talent perspective? Do you think more needs to happen to grow local talent, or are we on the right trajectory? Some closing comments from you.
I think we need to do more in the talent space. Carolyn referred to it when she was kind of talking about inclusivity and diversity. I think the only way we solve complex business problems is diversity of thought, diversity of experience, diversity of skills, diversity of race. You need perspectives. You need people that bring different perspectives to the conversation to solve complex problems, which means we need to embed security into curriculums, not necessarily just make it its own curriculum. It needs to be part of all curriculums. We are moving into a digital world. It's more interconnected than ever before. And I think we need to embed it into our everyday activities and our everyday learnings. It is the new world that we are living in, whether it's us as individuals or employees. So I think we need to start to encourage that. And then we need to build talent pipelines that we can pull in that diversity and inclusive community into the teams that we're trying to create to solve business problems. So as I said, this is not a technology problem. This is a business problem. And you look at businesses, we have diversity initiatives in all of our institutions to come and solve some of these, transformational business problems that we're all facing. So I think inclusivity and diversity has got to be part of your recruitment strategy.
Yep, as a mentor of mine once said, it's not just who's at the table, but how much of a voice do they have at the table. And I really appreciate your perspective as always, Adam. Thank you for that. John, we'll go to you and then to Robert with a closing comment. John, from your perspective, what has been the most rewarding experience of what you've engaged on with all of these subcommittees?
So it's always heartening just as an Ontario citizen to see the number of great people who are really committed to helping improve the resiliency of the province. So at the risk of sounding a little bit Pollyanna-ish, we have a complex problem here that has got a lot of different dimensions, but seeing the folk who have been prepared to join up to the expert panel, have been committing their time and energy, their creativity and insights, that's incredibly heartening to think, and from a selfish perspective, it means that, even as provincial CISO, I'm not charged for fixing this problem. It's a collective fix. So, I think the willingness of people to really roll up their sleeves and get involved in helping the province address this the big issue is really heartwarming. And thanks to the folk on the panel and everyone else who's not here today but is part of that expert panel for your efforts. It's great to see that commitment.
Absolutely. You want to go fast, go alone. You want to go far, let's go together. And I think that together philosophy has allowed us to go quite far. Robert, the last words are for you. You know, you're an accomplished, as is everybody here, but you're a very accomplished individual in the world of security and world of IT, you know, retired as well, but you're still giving back. What's motivating you to continue doing what you're doing?
Yeah, I'm an immigrant. I wasn't born here. I've been in Ontario ever since I came to this country, and I am just so proud to be a Canadian and Ontarian, and grateful to have the opportunity to live in this wonderful province and country. And my family and I, we have really done well. Being here and so grateful. And, this is an opportunity for me to give back a little bit, and I'm just so grateful for the opportunity to work with like-minded, professionals who are really committed to help the province and the broader public sector and all Ontarians, through the process. So, it's I like to think that I have something of value to provide and contribute, and I'm just so grateful for this chance and opportunity. So that's my story.
Absolutely. And I recently returned from a trip in the Middle East, and one of the things that I tweeted about on my return was everybody wanted to know more about my trip. And that reminded me about why I moved to Canada myself, where there's a willingness to learn and a willingness to share. And I think, we shouldn't underestimate how powerful that is. And I certainly agree with you. The immigrant experience definitely contributes a great deal to it. So thank you for that heartfelt closing. I know we could continue with this conversation on a variety of topics. I've taken a whole bunch of notes, but I do want to thank all of you for once again taking the time to join me today. I'm going to ask you to stay on while I thank you once more, and I thank our audience for tuning in. You can watch these sessions on demand, and if you have any questions, you can reach out to our team directly, and you'll get some contact details if you want to have any further discussions. If there's one thing that I've learned, and I said this in a talk last week, is that if you've never made any mistakes, you've not tried something new. And I think from what I'm hearing is that we've created a bit of a safe space for us to try new things, to try new ideas in cybersecurity, and build community around it, creating a safe space around cybersecurity innovation and resilience. I want to thank my panelists for taking the time, for contributing towards this, and to our audience. Thank you so much for joining us. My name once again is Ali Hirji from Durham College's Center for Cybersecurity Innovation, as well as the AI Hub. Stay safe, stay blessed, and we'll see you in another episode sometime in the future. Thank you.